Good morning, John. It's Sunday Morning Live with John M. And here is our host, John M.
Good morning, everybody. And before I start, I already posted something about this, but I want to offer those of you who saw it an apology for we had a minor technical mishap when we were readying the camera and the Steadicam and so forth for this morning's show. We were wrestling with it, and the camera was not supposed to be live, and we were not supposed to be on Facebook Live, but apparently we were, and I let my true feelings be known with a couple of expletives, which nobody was supposed to hear, but apparently some of you did. So my apologies for that. We have all those technical problems worked out now. Everything is fine. Hillary is here. My special guest Mike Wells is here, whom I will introduce you to in a moment. And as I am oft to do, hear now a song. But I look in my mirror and I'm standing alone. You're not in there with me. You're not in my home. And that light is not flashing on my answer machine. You have not been calling, you have not been seen. You're not in my life. Oh, it's perfectly clear. Hey, you're not in my life. You're still here. Let me down easy when we left it as friends. But each day without you, I wake up without you again. And still my friends ask me if I know how you've been. Why don't they stop asking? Why don't they ask him? You're not in my life. Oh, it's perfectly clear. You're not in my life, but you're still here. I can handle these feelings. I'm alright without you. I'm alright now, I'm healing. Even found someone new. But my baby, she asks me, will I ever let go? And I tell her it's over. I say it was over long ago. She does not believe me when she looks in my eyes. She sees what the truth is, and she cries. You're not in my life. It's perfectly clear. You're not in my life. You're still here. So that was Still Here, the title song from a record I did a number of years ago in Nashville. And some of the more alert among you may have noticed that I am using my 6-string guitar. This is in addition to Sunday Morning Live and my interview, which is coming up with Mike Wells. This is also the resurrection of John's 6-string guitar day. I'm going to be playing mostly this guitar this morning because, as some of the regular followers among you know, this guitar was damaged a few weeks ago on the way to a gig. And you can actually still see if you look. I don't know if you can see it on camera. You got to look really close, but right in here there was the heel. This part of the guitar is called the heel, and it was cracked clean through. And so my thanks, a very important shout out to Norik Renson of Renson Guitar Repair, who repaired this guitar for me quickly and efficiently. And so I'm enjoying playing it again. I've been without it for several weeks, and so I hope it sounds good to you. It sounds and feels good to me, and I'm happy to have it back. So now, having gotten that out of the way, welcome Mike Wells, career musician, mastering engineer, former recording engineer and mixer, and musician. You play. You don't really perform, as I understand it, anymore. But you have played and still play for your own enjoyment a few instruments.
A little, yeah.
Drums, am I right about that?
I did some drums. My main instrument was guitar.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so now you are the I guess owner, founder, CEO of Mike Wells Mastering.
Yeah.
And
for about almost 20 years now. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So that's you must be doing something right if you're still doing it.
Managing to stay in business.
Yeah. Yeah. So yes.
Say hi to Barry Rudolph.
Hey, Barry Rudolph.
Barry Rudolph.
You guys are friends. I noticed that on
Barry's
Facebook.
a wonderful guy.
Yeah, and a very good engineer. I've learned a few things from him.
Oh, me too.
And
Well, lots of people are here. I'll just quickly go through.
Yeah, please.
Paul Zolo.
Hey, Paul. Good to see you.
John Zipper.
Hey, John. I'm going to be talking
Angelina.
about you again in a minute. Hi.
Juskin is here.
Hey, Justin. Good to see you.
So many people. Jimmy Hunter.
Hey, Jimmy.
Jimmy Hunter.
Good morning.
So anyway, I'll let you get back to your conversation. I just wanted to say that.
Well, I'm glad all you guys are here. I'm always, I always wonder, is anybody going to watch? So it's always very gratifying to know that some of you are watching, and welcome back. It's good to have you back here. So why don't we start with the very basic, as you and I were talking a week or so ago, and I told you that the first couple of records I made, especially the first record I made, I didn't really think there was I didn't understand what mastering was.
Yeah.
And, we recorded the tracks in the studio and then we mixed them, and we got a mix that I thought sounded great, So then, why do I need to master this? It sounds the way I want it to sound right now. So why not just put it on a record and put it out there?
Right.
So answer that question. Why not do that?
Why not do it yourself?
Why bother with mastering?
Why bother with
what does mastering give you that a good mix doesn't give you?
Sure. Before we get started, great tune, by the way.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. Thanks a lot.
I always enjoy seeing you play.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Right here.
I'm not paying him to say that or nothing.
No. I don't get paid to say that, but I wish I did. Let's see. So coming back to your question, I'll start a little bit back with my background in it.
Yeah.
Because that I think will help generate why I'm going to respond this way. So I first heard about mastering back in the early 90s, making my own records and being an assistant engineer and going to studios, and we would get everything down to a 1/4 inch 2-track or a 1/2 inch 2-track if we could afford it. And then the engineer would say, okay, we're going to take this to mastering. And back then, well, what's that?
Yeah.
And at that time in history, it was really prepping the final product for production. So at that time, it was prepping it for vinyl or prepping it for cassette. We had made it past the 8-track at that point, so there was no longer authoring for that, so I've never seen that. But Yeah, we were going to LP or we were going to cassette. So it was the assembly of the tunes, and it was a final level and balance. So they
Making sure that one song wasn't especially louder than another one,
yes,
that kind of thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
but we're talking about at that time, these guys were regarded as, the term was the golden ears. That's how everybody was referred to back then. Oh, the mastering engineers are the golden ears. They were also known as these technical people. So they would do a QA, QC process as well as doing a final touch and polish on the material. And they would also sequence the material so it was ready. And then they would prep whatever the final master product was that would go to production. The master, as it was called. So these guys were mastering engineers. They all back then had incredibly expensive custom audio tools to create this final product. They were highly respected, and they were also very specialized in doing one thing. And as we moved into the digital era with things like the DAT tape, again, these were incredibly expensive machines. Bringing them to this final product stage, we had a machine called the PCM 1630, which was an authoring machine. So you would take your product and you would pass it on to a half-inch tape or a quarter-inch tape from your mix to the master to go to LP or cassette. You would prep and author a DAT tape to go to CD, or you would prep and author a 1630 to go to CD, depending on what the manufacturing house would look for. So you also had these technical things like PQ sheets and all this other stuff to dictate the timing across the CD, and this knowledge was all very specialized.
Well, one thing that I noticed when I finally started appreciating mastering and learning more about what it was just exactly what you're talking about. That I might have just spent several months in a recording studio where the walls are lined with all this incredible expensive equipment and big huge consoles, 48 channel consoles and all this stuff, and all these fancy $1,000 microphones and all this stuff. And then I thought, well, what could a mastering studio possibly have that this place doesn't have?
Yeah.
But I found out they're two distinctly different animals, and a good mastering studio will have stuff that most recording studios don't have, and it won't have all the other crap that they don't need, because the recording studio needs that.
Yeah.
And I just, I still, even now today, I've made 6 albums, and my understanding now is limited to the extent that, I do understand some of the, balancing of frequencies and all of that, but what it really came down to for me ultimately was that if I take a recording, a CD or a CDR or a tape or whatever, of what I think is a really good mix, and I take the same song mastered, a CD of a master CD, after the mastering engineer has played with it, without altering the mix at all, because he can't play with the individual tracks. You can, but you can't change the individual tracks.
I would argue
you can with EQ. I know what you're saying, but anyway, where I'm going with that is that the mastered version, even though it's the same recording, sounds better. And sometimes I can't really put my finger on why.
That's the goal.
But it does.
To make it sound better.
So, yeah,
that's the goal.
Yeah, sounds more like a record.
Yeah.
So.
I think I cut you off. Where was your question going?
No, well, I don't know if I had a question. Just that, I think a lot of people who are early in the game of making records, especially today when so many people have little teeny tiny digital recording studios in their bedroom, because they've been convinced that this plugin will make an SM58 sound just like a Telefunken.
Yeah, okay. Well, I get where you're going, and I can speak to that. I get where you're going. I'll take one step back, and then I'll come into answering your kind of where you're at right now. Just finishing the thought of where I was at with these older things. The loudness war did exist back in those days.
Oh yeah.
And I wasn't mastering at that point, but there was, even in, when I was making records back then, you would take the mixes home, you would play them, these are cassettes with rough mixes on them. You'd take them back home because you didn't have a lacquer and a record at that point. You had cassettes. And you'd take them home, you'd listen to them, and you would, of course, compare them to other things.
Yeah.
And you would be like, wow, why isn't loudness, what have you? And I want to clarify out there what loudness is, okay? Loudness is a combination of peer pressure and self-esteem. That's it. And I'm not kidding, right? Because let's talk realistically here. If you get your mixes home, you're going to play them against something else that you respect as a professional product. If it is not as loud, then you feel that something is wrong with your recording. Guess what that is, kids? That's called self-esteem. Really, honestly, that's it, man. And when you're playing your mixes to your friends, they want to hear it again compared to something else. If it's not as loud, you feel something called peer pressure, because your friends are saying, "Hey, man, your mix isn't as loud as this other thing." So that's peer pressure. So one second.
Okay, yeah.
Life is like high school. If everyone's read that book, right?
Yeah.
This is high school, man. You feel pressure from your friends. You feel pressure from yourself. You want your record as loud because that's part of the record being professional. So you're following the herd, man. And again, loudness is a function of mastering to some degree, but finishing off the thought of kind of where you were going, how do people perceive mastering as today? Unfortunately, because our primary output is two forms. It's now more than ever a digital file that goes to a distributor, so that is put out on streaming service like Spotify. We're even past the point of buying digital assets like the iTunes Music Store or Amazon MP3. We're past that. The primary consumption is streaming. And loudness is all normalized at the streaming level. So the whole concept of the loudness war is gone when you get to streaming. And I'll say there's two exceptions to that. We can talk later if you want. However, people still, when you're in the creation process of making a record, they're still getting mixes and masterings from the engineer to listen to at home. So people still compare it to other things. So that peer pressure and self-esteem issue is not going away, because there is no way. There are ways, but people don't really kind of pay attention to them. People don't see a way to compare them to how it's going to come out on streaming. There are tools to do that, but it's not really known at this point. So that phenomenon of the human existence, that is, the things that go along with loudness, still exists. So finishing that thought, mastering has come down to the point of the understanding of the average person making a record is loudness. That's what mastering is. And because plugins, everyone's making records in the computer, because you can get plugins for free if you're stealing them, or cheap ones if you buy them. There's a limiter plugin with a threshold knob, and you pull it down and it makes the record louder. So I would say the majority of people out there that are coming into recordings that are new, their understanding of what mastering is making it loud. So you get any plugin on the market, you put it on the end of the food chain in your recording, you pull down the threshold knob until you feel like it's as loud as you want it to be, and you're done. You've mastered your record. That's how mastering is perceived today, outside of the professional engineering world. So the reality is, yes, mastering is balancing EQ. It is prep and QC for the streaming world or the physical product world. That is still part of mastering, QA and QC. And there are incredibly minor details that really matter. So loudness is a function of mastering, but how you get your record loud is not a simple action. One knob on a limiter called threshold is not the way to get your record loud.
Or a volume knob.
Yeah, I mean, it's a complex process. So that's how I would finish that off in the moment. I know it's a long-winded answer because I can talk forever. Ask Barry. Ask John. Ask Hillary. Man, I can.
Hey,
go. Yeah, I can. Go.
I will compete with you.
Yeah,
on
okay.
That. Ask Hillary.
Back to you.
Why don't we talk about Nikki Bloom?
Nikki Bloom. I am fortunate to work with some artists from the inception of their career and watch them grow and really turn into success. And that's fun. It's really amazing to see artists really happen in their career. Nikki Bloom is one of those artists, and I would also like to talk briefly about a new artist called Old Blood here in LA. Nikki's from San Francisco. I started working with Nikki back in like 2005. She did a couple of demos, like small singles, EPs, and then she got into making her first records with an engineer up in the Bay Area. His name is Dave Simon Baker. Phenomenal engineer and a wonderful guy. I've always enjoyed working with Dave, and he is a really, really amazing recording and mixing engineer. So Nikki came into the scene. She's a singer-songwriter, folk Americana writer, and she's a hardworking artist. There's so much more that goes into success than just the record. There's getting proper management. There's getting PR people behind you. There's creating a marketing strategy, and there's following through. And there's following through on all those things on a consistent, measured basis. So she toured relentlessly. She was always surrounding herself and improving the team that was surrounding her to help her further her career. And what really helped her take off was those, they called them the van sessions. They bought a VW bus, and her and the band, at this point she was now Nikki Bloom and the Gramblers, was what her band was called. She had moved from a solo artist into this group setting. And so she's touring around the world, grassroots touring, in this VW bus. And on the way from town to town, they would have a camera phone at the front of the bus looking back at the band, and they would do covers. Hall & Oates or... John Fogerty or John Cougar, and they would all kind of, tap on the van and acoustic guitar and her singing.
I've seen those.
Yeah, and that ended up getting her a spot on the Today Show, and through the efforts that they did on YouTube, it turned into a YouTube phenomenon. And I think the best story about Nikki and an artist really taking off is my mom has always said, well, I'll believe that you have a real career in music when I actually know of an artist that you've worked for. So I get a call from my mom one morning, and she says, Mike, I saw this amazing woman on the Today Show, and it was incredible. You have to hear her. What's her name, Mom? Nikki Bloom and the Gramblers. All right, Mom, I finally have a real career. I've been working with this woman for years. So Nikki's career has really done well. She's now signed to a major label. She's killing it. And so she's a story of an artist that's really taken her career seriously and seeing the results of that success. Now here in LA, just a couple of years ago, I've been working with this band called Old Blood. Myself and the recording engineer and the people around them watching them make this record have said, you guys have it. And we all know, as engineers and professionals in the world, when you see a band that has it, that's it. Because not everybody has it. And I heard this band, I saw this band, and I took them and I said, guys, you need to take this seriously. They're playing in clubs with shorts on and t-shirts and having a good time, and this is a doom band. And there's kind of a Sabbathy thing, but they have this Amy Winehouse kind of singer. It's an amazing combination. The songs are phenomenal. Their abilities as musicians is phenomenal. So myself, and I know a lot of other people surrounding them, was get proper management, get proper PR, create a marketing strategy, do it, take it seriously, and they did. And they've been working that record for 2 years. And I got an email from Tim the other day. They got signed to Sony.
Awesome.
So it can happen, man. I mean, if you're surrounded by people telling you have it, like you have it, it's really about creating much more than the music. It's creating a machine. And we've heard these stories for decades. You got to create the machine around you that will help you drive success. And you have to follow through, and you have to keep hammering the wall. But if you can create that team around you and you have it, you can cultivate that success as an indie artist, and you can take yourself to a professional career. Because I am not going to say the phrase that I hate more than any other phrase. I'm not going to say the next level. Don't ever say that. Don't ever say the next level. Don't do it. Say like the highest level or the previous level or the ultimate level, but don't ever say the next level.
Yeah, and my least favorite context to hear that in is, and I've heard it so many times at conferences and in various meetings and so forth, where some aspiring artist will be talking to a manager or a booking agent or somebody like that.
Yeah.
And they say, well, I need your help, And the music biz guy, agent, manager, whatever, will say, well, when you get to a point where you're selling out every show and you're playing 200 or more seat venues and you're selling everyone out and you're selling at least $500 worth of product at every show, and you're touring and you're working 5 nights out of the week on average, then you'll have enough momentum that maybe I'll pay some attention to you. Mm-hmm. And of course, the aspiring artist who isn't anywhere near that point yet says, well, if I already have all that, what do I need you for?
Yeah.
And then the guy says, because I can take you to the next level. You know.
That phrase is a sign of not knowing what you're talking about.
So Mike Wells tells me that, you see, here's what I got from this conversation we just had. The key to success is playing covers. So I'm going to play one. I'm gonna throw in a cover. I was thinking about playing this anyway this morning, and I figured that was just the perfect segue. And then we'll come back and we'll talk a little more. It's a song by one of my favorite artists, Steve Earle. Hey, pretty baby, are you ready for me? Yeah, you good rockin' daddy down from Tennessee. Just got outbound from San Antonio with the radio blasting and the bird dog on. Speed trap up ahead, Selma town, and old local yokel gonna shut me down. Yeah, me and the boys got this rig unwound, and we come 1,000 miles from the guitar town. Well, nothing ever happened to my hometown. I ain't the kind of just hang around. I heard someone calling my name one day, and I followed that voice down the lost highway. Everybody told me you can't get far, $37 and a Jap guitar. Now I'm rolling into Texas with a hammer down and a rockin' little combo from the guitar town. Oh, hey, pretty baby, don't you know it ain't my fault? Let me hear the steel bells humming on the asphalt. Wake up in the middle of the night and a truck stops, stumbling the rest stop. Wonder why I don't stop. Got to keep it rocking while I still can. Got a 2-pack, a habit, and a motel tan. When my boots hit the boards, I'm a brand new man. With my back to the riser, I make my stand. Hey, pretty baby, won't you hold me tight? We're loading up and rolling out of here tonight. Yeah, one of these days I may settle down and take you back with me to the guitar town. I'm playing songs this morning that I have fun playing on this guitar, and that's one of them. That's a fun song to play on this guitar. So,
by the way, Mike, what is your website? And also, you can put it in the comments later. But if people want to get in touch with you for mastering,
Sure. I'm a great example of someone who's outdated and needs to do a facelift on his web strategy. It's MikeWellsMastering.com, where you can find me on the usual channels, Facebook and whatnot. But MikeWellsMastering.com.
and also not to usurp your interview,
go for it.
but I know that you speak on panels.
Mm-hmm.
Are you speaking on anything locally?
Coming up, I am doing a panel on the value of professional mastering within production music at the upcoming PMA Production Music Association Conference, I'll be speaking September 25th. If for anyone watching is in the UK, I am speaking on the importance of metadata and encoding within the music streaming world at the AES Mastering Forum in the UK. My panel is September 22nd. Yeah.
Awesome. You're gonna be busy in September.
Yeah, and I have to fly really quick from the UK back to Los Angeles. So I'm trying to figure out how to work a vacation.
you don't want to fly
somewhere.
slow.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. And thank you, Jimmy
true.
Hunter, for
It's
posting
true.
Mike's website. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Hey, Jimmy is on top of it.
Yeah, Jimmy's one of our
So-
trusted listeners.
So, one question I wanted to ask you was, I know you came from playing music and then recording and mixing and that end of things, and then progressed into mastering. What drew you? I mean, a lot of people in the music business, in the music industry, whether it's agents, managers, recording engineers, coaches, whatever. A lot of them are frustrated musicians. A lot of them people
Yeah.
who want to be musicians,
Yeah.
and there are some people who are just really wrapped up in the technical side of things and the machinery and the toys and so on. And a lot of them end up in studios.
Yeah.
But what drew you? What was the enticement? What did mastering? What about mastering was the greener grass on the other side of the fence that pulled you away from the recording studio environment? And into
Sure.
that?
Yeah. That's a cool question. For me, it went two stages. It went from musician to recording and mixing into mastering. And so thinking back to the move from musician into recording, I was in a couple of bands that were signed and did marginally well and did some touring and all that. But when I wasn't on the road, which was never like worldwide tours, we were doing like what Nikki was doing. We're in a van, we got a trailer behind us, we're going from town to town, and we're having a blast, but we're not really making any money. And when I come back, I'm working in a factory. I'm just some factory hand on an assembly line because I don't have a lot of college knowledge because I wanted to be a musician. And you know what the most commonly uttered phrase out of a music theory graduate like myself is? Would you like fries with that, sir? So I'm working in factories when I'm not on the road, and the dream of being a full-time musician was there. I was 19, 20. But as I looked around, even at guys that were in far more successful bands than myself, this is metal, thrash metal, speed metal, death metal back in the time, that's my background as a guitar player, was the likelihood of, getting into a spot where I was making a full-time living was just small, man. And thinking about coming back to making minimum wage, working in a factory, and life really going nowhere, it seemed like such a crapshoot that I was making records with these bands, and I'm working with guys that made a living making records. So I thought, this looks like a good alternative because I could stay being a musician, but I could also get a job in a place that's music related and is fun because I'm a technical guy. I started off with 4 tracks. I hung out with some guys that were electrical engineers that repaired gear, so I knew how to modify my Marshalls, and I knew I was an apprentice at a luthier, so I could repair my guitars and modify my guitars. So I've always been kind of a nerd in that regard. So hanging out with the recording engineers, this is all tape, back in the early 90s, Different Fur and in Hyde Street and other places in San Francisco. And I'm hanging out and I'm being a nerd with these guys, and so recording and mixing was fun, but there's this mastering thing, and what the hell is that? And since I was a nerd, I was interested. But the most interesting part, and people that know me know this part of me, there was only a couple of people in the San Francisco Bay Area that did mastering, and I would ask them questions, and they were dicks. The response from all 3 of them was, shut up and let me do my job. And I would ask questions like, what is it that's going on here, man? What are you doing? And man, it was a hostile environment, man. And so being the pig-headed dude that I am, I was like, well, I want to figure this out. I want to know what the big secret is. Now, back then, and this is now we're talking about the mid to the late 90s, and Pro Tools had come out. It's all on the Mac. Everything's, again, really expensive. Not that recording was ever cheap back then, but no one was doing mastering. It seemed like a safe bet, and it also seemed really, really interesting. So it seemed like here's a way to find a niche in an industry that was flooded at the time with recording and mixing engineers. And here's this thing that's really technical and seemed really interesting, and also seemed very safe since there wasn't a lot of guys doing it. Now, apparently myself and a lot of other guys my age felt the same way. And then this thing called the internet came out, around 97, 98. And also digital tools like back then, Sonic Foundry SoundForge and CD Architect, again from Sonic Foundry, was coming out. So here's these tools to create Redbook CD masters, and it was affordable, relatively affordable compared to things like the PCM 1630 and, some other like the Sonic Solutions workstation. These guys were really expensive. So I was moving into that world, but as I got further down the road and started getting analog gear of my own and really, getting loans and building a real business, as the internet was moving around, you started to see that there was about 30, 40 other guys that were my age around the country jumping into this with the same idea I had. Hey, this is a safe bet. So now we've got some real competition. And now fast forward another 15, 16 years. And like I said a few minutes ago, now the average Joe, thanks to YouTube, is a mastering engineer, and it's
Yeah.
all about cracking some plugins or spending $100 or even less on a free piece of software like Audacity or Fruity Loops, and just getting the limiter on the end of the master bus and cranking down the threshold knob.
One thing I wanted to, we're gonna have to start winding this down here,
Yeah.
but one thing I really did want to touch on, because I noticed when I was checking out Mike Wells Mastering online and different things, there's a big emphasis made that you do all your mastering in analog.
Yeah.
And I learned the value of that fairly early. I made some digital recordings, and back then it was like this, like somebody had this great cutting edge idea. You know what we're going to do? We're going to take this recording and we're going to bounce it to analog tape,
Yeah.
and then we're going to put it back. And I thought, wow, but I kind of understand, the value of it, but again, keeping it brief if you can, and not getting too technical.
Brief?
Why is analog important in that chain of the, what's the advantage? Why not just digitally master it?
Sure. That's a great question. Brief. Okay. All right.
You can do it.
Just poke me when I start going down that road. See, now it's already too long. That's a simple answer. And the answer is analog mastering is a great way to leverage analog at some stage of the recording process and still capture some mojo, because so many products are mixed in the box. So it's a great way to leverage that process. Now, using tape in the mastering process is called tape layback, because you're taking a recording out of the box, you're putting it on tape and capturing it back. In the old days, you would record the tape, you'd mix the tape, and there you go. And there were all kinds of trade-offs. Now you can use tape as a way to add that color, that process. That it's also can be a compressor, can be an EQ,
Exactly,
can be a
yeah.
harmonic enhancer. So you can use all that to bring it out, bring it back. Now, of course, without getting into a long-winded answer, not all tape machines are created equal.
Right.
The type of tape machine, the type of tape, the kind of all kinds of stuff is going to make a huge difference. So tape layback to a 4-track, don't do it.
Yeah.
Tape layback to some tape deck you got on eBay,
Don't do it.
don't do it. Don't buy a deck just because you
Half
think it's
inch at
going to be
least.
cool.
Yeah.
Never use noise reduction on a tape deck because you think that's going to help.
No.
Just leave that to a professional.
That's what you want, is
Yeah.
some of that tape noise.
Leave that to a professional.
What the engineer that sold me on doing that analog bounce step when the first time I did it was because I asked him the same question. I said, why are we doing this? And this was a rock record that we were making, and he said it'll bring your drums back to life.
It will.
It'll make them just stand up off the tape.
will.
And it did.
It will.
Yeah.
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 I have a question.
Yeah.
So, aside from the fact that you're great and you're wonderful,
Why,
how
thank
would many of the people that are watching this show are singer-songwriters? How would they go about picking a mastering engineer, or would they just rely on their
That's a great
recording
question.
engineer?
Yeah. Well, obviously, there's referrals, which are probably the number one way to go. And the recording mixing engineer typically will have more than one referral, because they'll have different referrals for different genres of music. And that's a great way to go. You can look at someone's discography and have they made records that you really like. I get a lot of people calling me up for records that they've made, or records that I've worked on that they like. So just look out on the web, hey, who's got a really good background in Americana, if that's what you're making, or folk music, singer-songwriter, if that's what you're making, and you'll find some people. I've done a lot of work in that genre, so I get a lot of people calling me out of the blue for that genre because I worked on Nicky's record, because I worked on Tony Sly's solo records, that kind of stuff. So yeah, referrals and just searching for relative stuff that you enjoy.
I have one more question, because I know you really well, and I don't know if you want to talk about Swan, but
Yeah.
would you speak to the ever-present situation of increasing your income stream as an artist in the music business and otherwise, because many of the people that are watching are singer-songwriters and they're trying to make a living in it?
Yeah, diversification within your skill set in the audio engineering or just audio field in general, I personally believe is required at this point. The glorification that we do to the senior guys, that world doesn't exist. It's kind of like talking about the signed musician. Even signed musicians are doing other things. So find out what your skills are and look for opportunities outside of just being a recording, mixing, mastering engineer, just being outside of a musician. And what can you do other than serving coffee? Myself, I've seen an opportunity within the file delivery tool because of myself and other engineers always using Dropbox or WeTransfer, Hightail, you name it, as these ways to deliver files, but we're always using multiple tools to solve very simple problems to the audio engineer and the musician. So being a technical guy and having connections to some other software people, like my older brother, who's a senior software engineer, he, another mastering engineer, and myself came up with this software tool called Swan, swan.audio, swan like the bird, swan.audio. And it is a file delivery tool with some features that are specific to audio engineering when working with musicians or other audio engineers. It's free. Check it out, www.swan.audio. And that's a way, as we move into further versions of the software, that I'm hoping to increase my income stream as an audio person. Yeah. Great.
Cool. There was one other question I was going to ask you, and I hope I can remember it. What?
I interrupted you. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Well, no, that's okay. But
You wanted me to be long-winded about it.
no, man, I don't remember. I tell you what, I will play my last song, and if I can remember what the question was by the time I'm done, I will ask you, and if not, we will just finish it off for today. But this is an older song from my record, Still Here, and it's another 6-string song. I haven't played this one in a while, and I enjoy playing it. And it's another original. I'm not doing another cover, even though it could make me successful.
Balance. Balance.
I've looked on the ocean and I've looked on land, but I haven't found you yet. You're somewhere between my heart and my hand, I bet. Somewhere between the paint and the easel, between what is false and what's true. Somewhere between the good and the evil, that's where I'll find you. I can dream of you when I sleep at night, but you are not in my bed. You're as slow as a glacier and as fast as light, the way you pass through my head. Somewhere between a heart that's wide open and a heart that's been broken in two. Somewhere between Hong Kong and Hoboken, that's where I'll find you. Or somewhere between adventure and mystery, that's where my destiny lies. At a moment when I least expect it, it hits me somewhere between the eyes. Somewhere between millions of people, somewhere between one and two, somewhere between the young and the feeble, that's where I'll find you. Oh, somewhere between paint and the easel, that's where I'll find you.
Beautiful, John.
somewhere between. Thank you, Hillary. Kind of you to say so. I don't think I can remember what that other question was.
I do.
Yeah?
Yeah, I remember.
Okay.
No, plugins don't sound like the real thing. I'm serious. Yeah.
No, I certainly agree with that.
I could be long-winded about why, but you'll kill me. Or Hillary will.
Well-
You're going to hit me over the head with that thing if I.
Well, I want to say thanks again to all of you for joining us this morning, as you so often do. Next week, 1 week from today, my guests will be the amazing bass player Chad Watson and Pam Lowe, an equally amazing singer, and they're going to be here and do some music with us, and we'll do some stuff together, I'm sure, because we've done that before. So I'm very much looking forward to that. In the weeks to follow, we have I'm going to be on the road next month for a couple of Sundays, and John Zipperer is going to be with me on one of those Sundays. We're doing a gig together up north, so that'll be fun. And we have last night, Hillary and I went and saw the Tall Men Group, and Severin Brown from the Tall Men Group has already been a guest on this show. Marty Axelrod is going to be a guest here in a month or so. So we got a lot of cool stuff coming up, and I hope you will continue to join us. I will go back to playing both guitars in the weeks to follow. I also want to do a real quick thank you shout out to our supporters of this show, CAD Microphones and Music Connection Magazine. Thank you all for helping us and supporting us as you have done. Shub Capos and Fishman Audio. So thanks to them, and thanks especially to my guest Mike Wells for enlightening us on mastering and music biz stuff. And we're all going to go have breakfast now.
Yeah.
At Country Folks. So if you know where that is, come join us. And if you don't know where it is, sorry. But we're going to be on our way for this week. Thank you again. Hillary, anything more to say from you?
Yes, thank you so much, Mike, for getting up and coming over and gracing us with your presence and talking. It's always wonderful. Thanks everybody for coming, and have a great week.